Welcome to a new episode of Hacks and Hobbies with your host, Junaid Ahmed. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the process of podcasting. The podcasting, like anything else, is a continuous process. It's a continuous learning process because you're literally learning all the things that you need to know, need to be able to do to one, get the podcast recorded, interviews recorded, you're getting all this content recorded and saved on your computer. But now you've got to save, or you got to spend time to edit these audios, make sure it sounds clean, make sure everything is good, and then you can send it out to the world, meaning publish it to the podcast universe. Now, there's something new I had tried on some of the episodes past couple weeks ago, and that is I was talking about the beginning of the episode. I was talking about a previous interview, and it kind of throws people off, I guess, or threw off one person, but nobody else has come up and talked to me about the situation of promoting previous interviews on my podcast because kind of it's kind of proactive in my opinion, and I've got to market. I've got to basically inform you, not just market, but inform you of the past interviews. And if you haven't, if you only heard the latest interview, then you would not have any idea of what we talked about in the previous episode or who we talked to, although you absolutely have the ability to look through the list of episodes of who is previously came and gone. I think I should go back and listen to episodes from my favorite podcasters, Jonathan Stark in The Business of Authority with Rochelle, and Tim Ferriss's amazing podcasts, and all the other ones that I look up to essentially, and that will hopefully help me get better at my podcasting. So there's a lot of struggles, there's a lot of things that you gotta look out for, and we do not have unlimited time. There's never unlimited time. It's always fleeting. It's always moving forward. So the one thing is either you can bring on a team of editors, a team of editors to edit your podcast and publish them, or have it ready so then you can publish it yourself. The other is having somebody to transcribe the podcast text into text, so that can go on the blog page, on the episode show notes, and there's a lot of things involved in publishing a podcast. Now, that's only the publishing part of it. So if you break it down, there's many aspects of podcasting. There's the hosting part. Who's going to host the podcast? There's many options. And then the recording aspect of it. How am I going to record the podcast? Am I going to record it on my phone? Am I recording on my computer? Do I need to get a microphone? Right. So host, recording, editing, and then publishing. And then once you're done with with all of these 4 steps, host, you've got to only decide the first time you're going to start. When you just thought about, starting a podcast, you got to think about, okay, who's going to host my podcast? Is it going to be Podbean, Libsyn, on your own WordPress setup, or are you going to use Anchor? Once you've decided these things, some of these services you got to pay monthly fee, and they basically will either take care of distributing your podcast to other platforms, or you have to go figure out that distribution for yourself. For example, if you're hosting the podcast on your own site through WordPress plugin or whatnot, you would have to go over to Apple to create your podcast on iTunes directory. You'll have to go to Google to create your podcast to the Google directory, the Google Podcast. You have to go to Spotify. You have to go to Stitcher. You have to go to TuneIn and iHeartRadio. And basically, every platform that you think your audience might listen to your podcast on, you need to go out there, Overcast. You have to go out there and create those accounts for yourself, for your podcast, and submit it to their directories. So you have a broader reach. And most of the cases, I think I've had the same experience on hosting it myself on WordPress site or setting up through Libsyn. They will give you an RSS feed that you then got to go up and set it up on the different platforms that you want your podcast to be on. And Podbean, I don't have much experience, but I did see somebody who was using it. They've been around for a while as well. Or you could go with Anchor. Now, Anchor is amazing. They have a mobile app that you can use to record. They already take care of the hosting. They take care of the distribution as well because they were like, it's 2017, it's 2018, it's 2019. If you want to start doing a podcast, you shouldn't have to worry about any of these things. I mean, anybody who's thinking of publishing a video channel, they don't have to think much about it at all. They can either go to Vimeo, they can either go to YouTube. There's so many platforms. All you gotta do is you gotta record your video and upload it. There's even Facebook. There's so many platforms for video. So why should it be so confusing and complicated for audio, which is so much easier to consume and create? So Anchor changed the game, and recently they're in talks to be acquired by Spotify, which means that we're gonna get a lot of awesome tools. So yeah, so those are four main things that you gotta worry about when you're starting a podcast. Who's gonna host it? Which different distribution networks do I need to go to? And then you got to worry about, okay, now I've got to record the podcast. Okay, where do I record it? Do I just record it using voice memos on my phone? Sure, that's not bad at all because iPhone has created some really intelligent systems on the device that will isolate your voice from the environment. There's 3 microphones on the iPhone, which does noise canceling and environment canceling to a really good extent. The number 2 is the way to record is, of course, you have a microphone connected to your iPhone or iPad, and then you can even use different applications on these devices to record. The other way is, of course, you're recording on a desktop with a heavy-duty microphone or with a regular microphone. It all comes down to, okay, what's the level of audio quality do you want to get? The higher the quality, the higher the attendance, the higher the number of people that will come and listen and pay attention to. So that's 3 different ways to record your podcast. Well, 2. Either you're mobile, either you're on the computer. Well, there's the third way. You get an audio recorder. This is dedicated audio recorder, and there's many different models. There's ones from Zoom has some. There's Tascam has some. So there's many different audio recorders that you can get to record your audio. And some of these recorders are really high-end. You can plug in a full-end microphone, high-end microphone or any plug-in microphone on it to record your audio. So you minimize that noise, you minimize catching surrounding sounds, unless that's the kind of podcast you're trying to create. It all comes down to what is your target audience, what is it that you're trying to get out of it. Okay, we've got multiple things down. We've got hosting figured out. We've got distribution platforms figured out. We've got the recording figured out. The next one is publishing. Now, publishing is important. Do you publish your podcast as is? As you're recording it, you're publishing it. So all the ums and ahs are okay because especially if you're having a conversation with somebody, then those are okay. Those pauses, they relate to listening to a conversation among two friends or two colleagues or two acquaintances, whatever it is. It helps to translate, to carry over that conversation, that context. The context is very important. So the context is carried over through the audio in that format if you keep those ums and ahs. There are some audio processing that I recommend, noise removal, removing of sounds that distract the audience from the message. It all comes down to, what are you trying to aim? I mean, is this just your hobby? What is the purpose behind this episode? Now, today is a rainy day, so you might hear some raindrops coming in as I drive under these trees, these big blobs of raindrops dropping on the car. So those are some of the things you look at, and when you're doing a podcast. Publishing is done. Now comes the point of having show notes available, having links available, right? Links and show notes and transcription service. So do you bring on the transcription service, or do you have enough time to transcribe the audio into text by yourself? Well, I know it's a lot of time consuming, especially if you have to listen to your own self and write the words down that you talked about already. So there's a few different apps that you can use. There's Otter.ai. This app is amazing. They give you 600 minutes for free every month. So you can upload your audio from your podcast app, or when you're done with the publishing process, when you're done with the editing process, and you're done publishing, it's already out on the internet. You can bring the audio up to Otter.ai. It will convert. It uses artificial intelligence to convert your text into audio. Sorry, the other way around. It'll take your audio and it convert it into text. And now you can look at the text and see if it makes sense. And you have the ability to edit. At least you have a starting point that's not a blank page. You have a page full of text. All you've got to do is fix the grammar, or you don't even have to fix the grammar. You just have to make sure that the words that you spoke.
As a listener to this podcast, I appreciate you guys. And I've talked so many times about the platform that I use, and that's Anchor. Anchor makes it so much easier for me to publish my podcast to several different platforms, such as Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, and so many more. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now, Anchor can match you with great sponsors too, so you can get paid to podcast. I absolutely love Anchor, and I use to record my podcast, Hacks and Hobbies, that you're listening to right now. I love the ease of use of the Anchor app and the way that I can publish the podcast. So if you've always wanted to start a podcast, make money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start to join me and the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. I can't wait to hear your podcast.
Are accurately represented in the text, because sometimes the audio cannot understand your accent. There are ways to train the audio or train the system to understand your audio and your interferences, but again, it's a work in progress. We don't have complete AI yet. Okay, we've got the publication. You've published the podcast. You've got the transcription set up, and you've transcribed the text. Now you've got the same transcription going up on. Either you can update the Anchor profile. There is a 3,000 word limitation, or you have your own dedicated website which it is dedicated to the podcast. For example, Hacks and Hobbies has hacksandhobbies.com dedicated to the podcast. We have every single episode that's been out on the different networks also available on the website. And there's links available on the website that we talked about in each of the episode. But again, I'm going through that same process of what I've told you. I've gone through the first few steps. I'm working on this transcription, figuring out this transcription service thing because that is time consuming, right? I have very limited time and I've got a few episodes that are in the backlog that I've got to go through and edit and publish. So it all comes down to, okay, how much time you got to take. And it's one of the reasons the past week was, we didn't publish a lot of episodes because we published like 10 interviews in the last 3 weeks. And that's a lot of interviews to go through for anybody. So I've taken this time to, you know, figure it out, figure out my system, figure out the flow of everything and what should happen first, what should happen next and second, and how can I automate some of these things. Some of the things that I've automated is as soon as a new episode is published, it can go out on Facebook, it can go out on YouTube, it can go out on Twitter, and there's still some bugs that this application I'm using that's not able to do snippets. So I've got to figure out how to fix that area, but it's not a big deal. And what is this? So what is this last process that I'm talking about? This last process, well, it might not be the last, but this process is specifically all about marketing. You've got to market your podcast, your episodes, your guests to your audience or to people who might not know about it. And the one thing that I haven't been doing is I haven't been niching down because so many of these podcast interviews are very broad. The one resonating factor, the one combined or the same, I can't even think of words sometimes. The one thing that I'm consistent on is learning about the stories of these guests. I have a consistent set of questions that I ask them. So I'm getting some kind of survey material down that can then go on the profile page for each of these guests on the website. Again, that aspect of it, that's another thing that I'm thinking of doing. And I'm going through the different plugins to see which one looks the way I want it to look. Which one has a clean look that I just want to show very specific things about my guests and the links and what we talked about on the podcast and those links to the podcast. So it all comes down to, okay, what am I looking for? And what do I think will be valuable for the audience that's coming to the website, learning about these guests? Okay, so we talked a little bit about marketing, very little bit about marketing, talked about automation, talked about having a dedicated website to the podcast. The next thing is follow up. You've got to follow up with your guests that you've talked to and ask them, hey, what did you think? What do you think? What did you think of the podcast interview that we just did? And how can we stay in touch? How can I help you in your in your journey, in your mission, in your goals to achieve this month or this year? So there's a lot of things you can do. And again, that promotes them. The one thing that I still haven't figured out or working on figuring out is when I do publish an episode for a guest, I will reach out to the guest I'll tell them, hey, your episode is going live tomorrow. The link could be found over here, and share it with your audience, share it with your people that you just had a chat with them, and then I also provide them with materials that they can use on Instagram or they can use on whichever social media platform they want to share and bring in their audience. And Some people have been great, some people have been amazing, some people have been um, not connected. I guess it all comes down to what is the motivation of the guest. Uh, are they coming on to promote something? And I'm absolutely happy to promote their books or their products or their services or whatever it is they're offering. I am happy to help out and happy to share it with you guys, and it's the innate thing to do. I mean, the only reason I've talked about the four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10 different things, different products and services that I use myself is because I find real value in using these products. Otter.ai is amazing. DreamHost.com, it provides an awesome hosting for me. WordPress is an amazing platform for you to grow your website from a simple blog, simple single page website to a blog, to a news site, to a site where you can teach lessons, to a site where you can sell products. It is so much more than a simple um, blog system that it used to be. So there's a lot of things that I'm passionate about and I love to use and bring attention to whomever might be listening. So that's a little update on this rainy February day as I take my commute to drive to work. Anyways, that is that is not all. Well, that was all in the aspect of okay, what do you look for when you're looking to start a podcast? What struggles that I'm facing and how I am solving some of the problems that I have. So there's three different tools specifically that I've invested in to help with the promotion and automation for the podcast. And you can find the links of those tools here in the podcast episode notes whenever it goes out, and I don't forget to list them in there. So yeah, that's what I've got. That's all I've. Well, I still have more time to go to drive, but I think that's pretty good and buttoned up. There's at least 18 more interviews that are in the backlog. There's six more this week, this coming weekend, and so it's just going to add on. It's just going to keep adding on. So I've got to figure out my system quickly, so then I can continuously bring value, bring content, bring information, bring um, wisdom to your ears, and it's just something that I'm super passionate about, and it helps me. Thanks for listening. Again, if you guys have any questions at all, you're welcome to give me a ring, send me a message on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, wherever you find yourself to be. Just give me a holler, and I'll be more than happy to answer your question and even bring those questions on the podcast and talk about them. And we can go from there.